I'm Janice Hossager. After 3 decades in the marketing business and many years of being an entrepreneur, I've learned a thing or two about marketing. Join me as we talk about marketing, small business, and life in between. Welcome to My Weekly Marketing. My husband and I have a long-standing tradition of going out to eat on Friday nights. He's more of, I would say, a routine guy, but I love trying new restaurants. So I'm always checking out new places in the city to eat. And when I find one, I add a little flag in Google Maps so I know where it's located and so that we can try it out on a Friday night. Recently, I found an Italian restaurant with this amazing story about how the owner emigrated from Italy and cooked these traditional meals using their grandmother's authentic Northern Italian recipes. And I knew I had to put it on our list. Why? Well, it wasn't because they had the fanciest website, and they certainly are not the only Italian restaurant in Austin. They did have great reviews and testimonials, but it was because within seconds I thought, these people get me. They know I love authentic Italian food, and I love doing business at an establishment that appreciates family and authenticity. They spoke my language, and they seemed to understand exactly what I was looking for. In other words, I connected with their story. And that's what we're talking about today. I'm joined by John Elbing, a storytelling and branding expert. Storytelling in marketing isn't new, and it's not just about sharing your origin story or posting customer success stories. John breaks down how the best storytelling helps customers answer these 3 questions. Is this for me? Can I trust this? And can I picture myself getting the result? So here's my conversation with John. Hey, John, welcome to My Weekly Marketing.
Hi, Janice. Happy to be here.
So for those who haven't met you before, tell us a little bit about you and the work you do, because it's sort of different than what we typically run into.
Well, I've specialized in storytelling, business storytelling, sort of strategic business storytelling. And so I help companies, but startups and NGOs and all different kinds of organizations create a kind of foundational story that is from their customer standpoint or from their audience's standpoint. Too often companies talk about themselves and pound their chest. And so the idea is to tell the story of who you help and how you fit in that story and how you can help. And so that's been my path in these last few years.
So I've had episodes in the past where I talk about the importance of storytelling, but you take a different approach. The framework that I use with my clients, I call it Trail to the Sale. And it really is based on the customer journey. Basically, that they don't just fall into a funnel and become customers. You have to be nurtured and there has to be involvement. So, talk about how storytelling is a way to guide customers through their journey, because that's your focus, right?
Yes, exactly. So first there's this word storytelling, where I find that there's storytelling everywhere now. And so if you go onto YouTube or wherever and talk about storytelling, there's a million clips out there to tell you all these tips and tricks and how you have a hook and dance on one leg and all this kind of thing. And somehow that's not what makes storytelling. So I call it story building because the idea is to find the right story to tell. Then you can use, create a website or a pitch deck or, tell your story, and then you can use these tricks. But the idea is first to have that core story. And I guess the main idea is to flip the script and really see yourself from the outside, see yourself from your customer standpoint, and start from where they are, who they are, their aspiration, their challenge, how you can help, and how they'll have a better future. I mean, how we can make their life better. And so there's a way that people, encounter a brand. And if you can follow that normal way where, what's going on in their head, they'll follow you along. You hold their hand along the story, which creates trust and engagement and a lot of other nice side effects.
Okay. So, with that in mind, how do most businesses get storytelling wrong? We all tell stories, right? On our websites, we all been like, this has been drilled into us.
Well,
So, go ahead.
I've seen a lot of tips. Like coach a lot of startups, and they talk about how to pitch. And often is start with your story. We started in our garage, and all these things, and somehow you can create a fun, engaging story. But we want to create a story that leads to a sale, not just to random interest. So I think I think the first thing is companies are caught in what they do every day. They're building a product or a service, and they're helping their clients, and they're trying to do better. They're trying to reduce the costs, and all this stuff. So what comes out naturally is we do this. Look what we do. Look how we do it. Look how good it is. And somehow the customer is missing in that story. And so the idea here is really to say, okay, your ideal customer, we get you. We understand your aspiration, your challenge, and here's how we can help. And people love when they talk when you talk about them.
Mm.
If you were in a cocktail party, and you sit down for a dinner, and there's two people on left and right, and on one side there's someone saying, "Look, I'm so successful. I do this, and you can imagine the last vacation I went on, and all this." And the other one says, "Hey, so tell me, what are you excited about? Tell me about yourself." You'll be a lot more engaged when the person that's open to listening and to the exchange than someone that's just shouting. And with business, it's the same. If they're interested in you, that's a powerful posture to have.
I love that because I used to tell clients, and I still do, especially on their about page, after you got the whole thing written, just do a simple word search and say, all right, how many times can you find the word I or me or us? And how many times can you find the word you on there? But which I think is really eye opening because we just do it because it's a monologue, right? So from a practical standpoint, if I'm writing an about page on my website, or if I'm writing anything on any brand or any part of marketing, how would I go ahead and create that dialogue when it's sort of one way?
Yeah. So the little trick, in the UK, they say, you said I, us, but there's the we. And so
Right.
so you're weeing all over your website, which is, I thought that was fun.
That is
Um,
funny. So they're not in front of us. How do we go ahead and create that two-way conversation?
So I'm not sure it's really a two-way conversation, but it's somehow where the person feels that the brand is concerned, takes you into account, sees you, even if
Mm,
it's in a generic way. So, well, I guess to come to the method, I find that we have when we encounter a brand, it could be a website, could be a billboard, could be a store. We go through 3 steps, and I feel that companies skip some of these steps. So I've called it recognition, perception, projection. And so the idea is first, when you see a brand, you sort of have to recognize yourself in the brand. If you don't know who it's for, you sort of think, well, I'm not sure it's for me. You're already scrolling by or clicking onto the next one. You want to go for a coffee with a friend, you walk down the street, you pass 3 cafes without even slowing down, and then one is the one because somehow you recognize yourself in that. And that can be linked to your identity, to your aspiration, to your challenge. If I say, as a young father, you're worried about how you feed your newborn. Well, young fathers will say, well, I'm not sure I was yet, but now I am. And they feel concerned. If I landed on a website that said, we specialize in services for independent consultants living in Geneva, Switzerland with a white beard and a cat, I'll think, ooh, I'm not sure what they offer, but they work with people like me. And so you start your presentation with a way saying, you count, and that creates that little extra trust at the beginning where you feel, if I was looking for an accountant and I'm a doctor and I find one that says, we specialize in accounting for medical professionals, I think, oh, well, damn, they probably know me better than this other random accountant because I sort of recognize myself in that. So, and then once I sort of feel like, oh, that's for me, then perception is really understanding what is the offer, how, the benefits. So it's about that people want to compare you to other things, put you in a box. There's what category you're in. How are you different is really important because, everyone, whatever you're doing, someone else is doing it too.
Mhm.
So it's, how are you doing it differently? Clarity is important. A lot of people want to be clever in their marketing, and often clever isn't, it just adds confusion. So then you get to that phase where I understand it's for me and it's really good and I want to go forward. And then that third step I call projection, is you sort of imagine what it'll be like. And you sort of think, well, I'll have to buy it and I'll have to install it. And, well, will it be easy to use? And if I have a problem, and what's going to happen? And all those little doubts, all those little obstacles sort of slow you down. And even if you think, okay, I'm going to do this, but next week I'll come back, and then I don't. I would say I'm looking for a to-do app. So at the beginning, there's one that's best for teams. That's not for me, but there's one specialized in independent consultants. That's for me. It has all these great features. And then I think, okay, then I have to go through my emails and my stuff. So if you, as you said before, if you can take the customer journey, imagine where those obstacles or those doubts will be, and explain how easy it'll be, how how you can even talk about all the little problems that you solve. In a story, you sort of have to choose the main problem you're solving. But then later on, you can say, hey, then you no more worries, and you don't have this, and you won't waste time. And close your eyes and imagine how your life will be better. Finally, you'll be this and that. And so people sort of pre-live your offer and are that many steps closer to this engagement. Instead of saying, that sounds interesting, but I'm not sure, it's sort of like they're already saying, oh, wow, yes, that would be good for me. So you sort of have the right people listening because they recognize, they're the ones you chose, that they recognize themselves. And then you bring them a few steps farther in this engagement with these elements of clarity and trust and things. So those are those 3 steps that I work with.
I just love this so much, and probably because it fits so nicely in with the framework that I use as well. So I'm gonna ask you a few questions about each one, if that's okay. Okay, so you talked first about recognition. So where in the customer journey do you really start seeing recognition break down? Is it something that they only need when you're becoming aware of it? A lot of businesses will have different landing pages on their sites for different geographic regions, right? So they'll have, let's say they're accountants, right? So this could be an accountant in Chicago or an accountant in Paris or whatever. And it'll be the same company. It'll just kind of be specific for a certain region. But once they get past that landing page, it becomes very generic. Is there a point in which you have to keep that going? I mean, or is there a way in which do you have to try to say this? Do you
I
need to
get the
keep
question.
that record? You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
okay,
So
okay.
so there are different angles of this. So one is, this is about, as you say, the first encounter, the awareness. Someone says, hey, go look at that website, and you arrive on the website and you don't have that much, background information, or you did a Google search and you land there and you sort of, you're ready to, to jump from one to the other, very quickly. And so if you have that strong recognition, you'll say, ooh, that one's interesting. And it'll get you to just keep scrolling or keep listening. And then you can get into, what your offer is, the benefits, and all the rest. So that's one part of recognition, is really this idea that first encounter. Because I sort of feel that once you have a salesperson in the room explaining the thing, I mean, you've gone farther than that. But even then, there's this mindset of, coming from their standpoint. If you get that sales meeting and you come in and say, okay, here's our features, here's the thing, here's the stuff. But, people will say, well, yeah, but if you start with saying, okay, we understand that you're going through this, this is your issue, and this is what you're trying to accomplish, and these are your issues, and this is how we can help, even there, that strengthens the whole, the whole connection, the whole relationship. There's also a question of consistency. sometimes I get a feeling that, the website is pretty good, but then, the sales call tells a different story, and then there's an ad and you sort of don't see the link. And by creating this sort of core story, it confirms it. It feels that people are reassured that there's something strong there. They're not trying to, trick you with one day with one trick and the next day a different one. There's a real kind of a mission and values and a posture there that they can trust. And by being consistent, that also enhances this idea of recognition in this second phase of kind of relationship and you're building.
Gotcha, gotcha. But recognition definitely requires niching down. It has to, or right? Or can it be a broader audience?
So, well, I think with all the companies and startups and everyone I work with, I mean, I always feel they don't niche down enough.
100.
We were talking about the accountant for medical professionals. If you want to be one more accountant, whenever you live, why would they choose you? But by niching down, I find that companies, they're afraid to lose that one random sale. If it's broad, they keep it vague. If someone stumbles there by chance, there's still a chance that they'll buy. But being sort of, lukewarm for everyone isn't very interesting compared to being really interesting for a smaller group. You can't niche down to, for if it's independent consultants with the cat, well, maybe you don't want to go quite
Right.
far. But yes, being very specific. So once you get to big, gigantic companies, I don't work with Coca-Cola and Nike and things like that, but well, I mean, how do you define that niche? I find Nike interesting in the sense of a lot of these sports lifestyle brands, have this idea that this is sports gear. And with this just do it slogan, it opens it up to an aspiration which can be, you know, get the girl, be part of the in crowd, look cool,
Hmm.
all everything else, and that niche becomes a feeling more than a demographic.
Right.
Um, I find that companies jump on these personas too quickly. Okay, it's between 30 and 50, and it's this and kind of thing. But I find if you're building a persona, start with the aspiration and the challenge. And you might find
Mm.
that the grandma has the same challenge as the young boy, and if you talk about that, they'll both recognize themselves in this way. It doesn't have to be about demographics. Yeah, so absolutely niche. But I found that also a lot of companies will come to me and say, hey, but, we do this and that, and, we do too many things. How can we have one story? But, but that's where it becomes interesting because we always arrive at that one core story because it takes them away from the product ranges. It goes down to their core kind of mission. You know, Apple does phones and watches and computers and things, but it's sort of like we give you you're a creative and we give you the tools to shine. And that's their niche kind of. And yeah, so that's an interesting exercise. And often what comes out of it, I've worked with companies. I had this group of 10 people and I said, okay, write down on a piece of paper what your company does. And I got 10 different stories. And so when they build the story together, suddenly there's this thing that then carries over into marketing, into sales, into how they talk and what they're doing. One said, I can finally tell my mom what we're doing because it made sense. And so it's
Yeah.
not just the message, it's this idea that it gives the company kind of focus. It clarifies this positioning. These are the people we help. We talk about customer centric so much, but here it's a way of saying you're seeing your company through your customer's eyes, and it changes how you think. Is that the best product we should do, or does that help our customer the best? And you can almost hear the click in people's minds, and that's really powerful.
Mm, mhm. Yeah, I know what you mean too about trying to, well, this is really kind of focuses on branding, right? So are you a house of brand or are you branded house? Do you have one core mission and vision for your entire organization that manifests itself differently? I'm thinking about like Procter and Gamble or some of the huge, huge corporations out there. Or are you, like you were saying, Apple really, it has different items for sale, but they really all appeal to that same aspiration, right? Creativity or functionality. So I love that. I think that's really important. And I've had that exercise as well, working with consulting clients, and you do get different messages from just about everybody in the organization, especially when you started out and trying to pull all those together. It's like, what do we do? And like you said, you get different completely different messages. So I think even as your company is growing, even if you're small, just making sure you write that mission and vision down, just really understanding what it is that you do and what you're all about is so important because it's easy. We start by ourselves, we start pulling in people part time, and then pretty soon we have a team and we have that sort of scattered approach.
Yeah, sometimes these mission and vision statements are a little bit empty.
Yes, I would say that.
There's the executive team goes on a retreat and comes back with these sentences and then puts them in a drawer. And no one, if you ask an employee, a customer facing employee, what is our mission? If they can't, if they don't know that, then there's no mission. I mean, it
Right.
has to help you in decisions. How am I going to respond to my customer? Well, I rely on that foundational kind of mission, values, and all that. And yeah, so often it's a check in the box kind of exercise, but when it's done well, that's really powerful.
I agree. I agree. So, what's a simple exercise that listeners could do like this week to improve their recognition and their messaging?
So one thing is to sort of l- look at your whatever, your website, your ads, your things, from the outside. Ask your dad, to come in and say, okay, who is this for? And if you don't, if your ideal customer recognizes themselves really strongly thinking, "Ooh, that's for me. That's a really strong position." And if you come onto the website and you say, "Okay, well, that's sort of for everybody," or "I'm not quite sure, it could be, but I'm not," well, then you have it sort of is a strong red flag of, okay, it's not really for someone. It's too broad. And I think that flipping stepping out and looking at yourself from the outside is, if you can do that, that's an easy way to sort of see the generics, the jargon, you're saying it, the same thing as everyone else kind of thing.
Mm, gotcha. That is powerful. Yeah, I agree. So let's move on to the next one, which was perception, right? So how is it different from positioning? Quick break. I want to talk to you about the thing almost nobody wants to work on, your messaging. Here's why it matters. Every single piece of marketing that you make sits on top of your core messaging, your website, your emails, even the thing that you say at networking events when someone asks, "So what do you do?" When the message underneath is fuzzy, everything you build on top of it gets wobbly. So I made you a guide. It's called the What Do You Do Formula Guide, and it walks you through the 5 steps with real examples to create powerful messaging about what you do so people stop and take notice. It's free, it takes just 15 minutes to complete, and it's the thing everything else is built on. You can grab it at janicehossager.com/what, or click the link in the show notes.
Well, perception, I find that once you've caught the person's attention, they'll spend a little bit of energy, but they won't spend too much. So if you go through there was a study that showed that people don't buy the best product or service; they buy the one they understand the quickest.
Mm.
So there is this idea of it has to be clear. So I find that one thing people do is they want to compare you to something. And if they compare you to the wrong thing, you're lost. I worked for this company that did the big automated coffee machine. And they tried to sell it to companies as their coffee machine, but this was high end, the kind of frappuccino, multi milks, multi coffee kind of thing. And they thought, why would we pay that price for a basically train station bad, coffee machine? Because in their mind, those big automated coffee machines, that's the only one they knew. So we worked on saying, this is a coffee shop in a box. Compare us to a coffee shop experience. Don't compare us to a train station or gas station experience. Your employees, you offer them free coffee and they still stop at Starbucks on the way because that's not what they want. So bring that coffee shop into your company kind of thing, and to fit in the right category. There's this whole almost science around category design. If you own a category, that's a powerful position. I've asked like 1,000 people to tell me. I'll do this quickly just to not to take up too much time, but give me three name brands of energy drinks, and people will say Red Bull, and there'll be a pause, and some will come up and say Monster, and then a very small minority can come up with a third brand.
Mm-hmm.
And Red Bull has 50% market share. They own the category. When you think energy drink, I mean, they don't even advertise the product anymore. They advertise this concept of energy drink. There are 192 brands of energy drinks. And,
Wow.
and so if you can really define, I'm an even accountant for medical professionals is a category compared to accountant. And if you can, then you can apply that. So category differentiations are really important, because often people will say, okay, it's a CRM. It's not, you don't tell me what a CRM does, a customer relationship management. Tell me why it's different. And often they'll say, oh, we have this many pixels and this many this, but it's really about, most companies do it this way, but and that's fine. But we do it a different way, and that's why it's interesting. And so perception is just this idea that you can come through and say, okay, you could explain to someone else what this company does or what this offer is. If you come out and you sort of think, oh, okay, that looks interesting, but they're gigantic. There's a company called, damn, it slips my mind, this gigantic multi-billion-dollar company. And I went out to their website. I had to ask ChatGPT what the hell the company did. All the top, biggest companies in the world use this company, but it's really not clear. It's, we empower with AI and this and that and stuff and work. I don't know. So clarity is important. But somehow I feel that, if I was going to spend time with a company, explaining what they do, at least that's the thing they do. They're not as bad. That middle part is usually the part that they're, sometimes not doing as well as they could, but usually, that's all they're doing. So I concentrate sort of more on, on the recognition and the projection, which often they skip completely.
Right, right. Now, there is a risk at being, what you were just talking about, the complication. Well, let me back up here. I used to work with a company that had creative names for everything they did because they were unique, right? Nobody could find them online because nobody was searching for that thing that they did, right? So that would be a risk of being too clever and not clear, right? So how do you differentiate yourself so that you are different? I think you touched on maybe the answer to this is just like analogies. Is that so people understand what you do, but you still speak to your ideal customer in a way that they can understand as well? Because a lot of times customers or companies will, because they have a really unique niche, they will speak just in language that they would understand, but it may not be clear to the outsider. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
So, like,
So I think that, even this idea of vocabulary, if you're using, what does your client, what do they call themselves? How do they frame their issue and their problem? A lot of IT companies sort of talk about their users. And I don't know anyone that thinks of themselves as a user,
mm,
because it sort of says, you're defined as using my product. How limiting is that? Instead of saying, you're a professional that's trying to do this. If you can frame their problem in a way they understand, you don't even have to. It's almost before talking about, the details of your technical solution. At some point, you'll have to get into that. If you're
hmm
selling something that is technically complicated, but you have to understand why it's interesting way before that. And then finally, when you think, that would really help us, how does that work? Then you can get into the complicated part. I worked with an NGO that was in water purification. And in developing countries, normally water purification, you ship by truck a chlorine, you pour the chlorine in the water and it purifies the water. They have a solution where instead of shipping the chlorine, they produce the chlorine with electrolyzed in salt and water on site. But at the end of the day, it's chlorine and water. And I said, well, what problem do you solve? And they started getting about people getting sick and all this kind of thing. But when we digged through it, the people in the field, their worry was that the truck wouldn't show up. If that truck got stuck in the mud, they wouldn't have the chlorine to put in the water. And by producing it locally, they solved the logistic problem. So if you can say, hey, you stay up at night because you're worried the truck won't arrive, without, of course, at some point, the whole point is that people don't get sick. But you understand the problem from their standpoint instead of, from just the main benefit. And so often with the companies I work with, is where we play with these levels. Are people looking for a practical solution or something more aspirational? Does the manager want to be the hero of his company by bringing in this great solution, or do they want to, solve the problem and reduce cost? And what is and often I find companies know more about their customers than they think.
Mm-hmm.
When you sit down and try to, take their standpoint and say, okay, we could say this or this or this, and say, that one resonates a lot more. I mean, you still have to test this and see how it's not magical, but there's a sort of thing, well, since I have this solution, the problem must be exactly that. But no, it's often there are levels to that. And if you get that's a way of kind of connecting where your customer will feel, ooh, okay, that's how I feel. And that's a strong position.
That is so good, and that's not really hard either. I love that you did a little digging. Even smaller businesses can do that. Just have a conversation with their customer, right? They don't need to hire a big agency to go out and get some data. This is easy to get, right?
And they probably already have it in the sense they've already had a million conversations with their customer.
Yes.
Yeah, and so they can sort of sit back and say, well, actually, what I heard was this, without even, but then of course you can go out and just say, you've been a customer for a long time. If I describe what I do like this, how does it make you feel?
Yeah. Okay. So the third step is projection. And I love this one so much because I think it's something that people miss. And I actually miss this one myself quite often. I have the framework I use goes awareness, consider, compare, and evaluate. This is all before the sale. And that evaluation stage is often trying something. But I love what you did because sometimes that's not an option. You can't always try something that you are going to purchase before you purchase it. So, how do you do that? How do you visualize this process with them? And is it as effective as an evaluation?
So it doesn't necessarily replace the evaluation phase. It just brings you a little bit closer to that next formal evaluation phase.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different parts of this. One is this sort of, that's going to be complicated. And there's all, you don't necessarily think it through that much. You say, oh, I'm going to buy a house, and say, oh, you're not sure what it entails, but that's complicated. So if this company is going to say, okay, we're going to sit down, we're going to understand your dreams, but your budget, your constraints, your family situation, and then we're going to find a few houses, and you're going to fall in love with one of those houses, and then we're going to work with you to get it for the best price, and you're going to have a thing. And by having them just imagine the process, that lowers the stake, that sort of lowers the fear quite a bit. Instead of going in saying, oh, I'm not sure what's going to happen, they can already feel like, okay, those are the steps. You see it in something like, say you sign up for Spotify and they say, okay, create an account, create your first playlist to share with friends. And you sort of think, oh, that's easy to do. But even something like SAP, which is this big enterprise level software that costs $50 million, takes 5 years to install, with 10 people having a burnout and always late, and it's a horror story. But somehow you can sort of walk people through to say, we have a method. We know what we're doing. We analyze your company in a way. We deploy our proven methodology. We level up. We test. We think, and so we come up, and and by trusting the, sort of seeing the process, that's already one step. Sometimes there's a transformation involved. You sort of going from stop being reactive to your issue, be proactive and things, and people will feel that transformation. And then there's this idea of stakes and positive future. So often when I talk with a company, they'll say, hey, but we have all these benefits and we solve all these problems, and there's no way we can say a story. Oh, you have the problem 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have solution 1, you have to create a story where you say, you're in this situation, you have this aspiration, but you have this challenge, we can help you. And then once they've got down to the down the page or further in the discussion, you can say, if you don't do this, you're going to keep your worries. You're going to continue wasting time. Your error rate will still be a problem. So if you can come back and raise the stakes and sort of remind people to say, these are your frustrations, and if you don't move forward, you're going to keep having all these issues, problems, worries, frustrations. But also close your eyes, imagine. Finally, you'll free up time for more interesting work, or whatever it is, whatever these benefits are. But have them. I mean, even the word "imagine" is really powerful. It gets people to say, "Okay, so if I did this, I won't miss, the CRM. I won't miss the follow-up. I'll have more, more conversions." And this extra part reassures, because you go through kind of these worries. Lever, sort of puts the knife back in the wound to sort of say, hey, you have all these problems. Don't forget, you were sort of hesitating if it's worth the trouble, but, and then imagine how your life will be better. And that they pre-live, your solution. And yeah, they're really a few steps farther. So it's a kind of a pre-evaluation where they've pre-lived it. They know how it's going to happen. They're reassured on that. They see, how, and then they'll say, okay, I'll sign up for the trial. Even some simple, I would keep talking about a CRM, and say, hey, you have, a week or two of free trial. But a trial like that is terrible. I mean, really? I'm going to input all my data. I'm going to change all my workflows. I'm going to, spend, all my nights to try this system. I mean, you're asking me for a crazy commitment to do the trial. For you, it sort of seems like, oh, we're offering a free service. No, you're asking for a crazy commitment. So, I mean, if you can bring people in to say, okay, this is going to really change my life, then they'll be more open to that commitment, which is the real evaluation, than if they sort of say, okay, I should do this, but I'll come back next week, and then I don't.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of what Donald Miller says on websites, how to have mid-first page, have 3 simple steps to achieving what you want. And if you can break it down easily for people, it doesn't seem as daunting. I think about this all the time because we've had a bank account with a certain bank for years and years, and our bank's been bought and sold and all of this. So it's just stayed with this giant bank in the US, and we hate it. All the fees, they're terrible to work with. Their customer service is horrible. But the thought of switching banks is so daunting because we have to change our direct deposits, we have to change the bill pay, all this stuff that, because we get postcards in the mail all the time say, well, you get $200 if you switch your bank or whatever. But that's not it. If they would listen to and say, this is a hassle, you can help us through this part of the process that's such a big hassle, it's done, So
exactly. Very
I think it's a great
recently,
example.
Apple Music came up with a thing where you can shift from Spotify to Apple Music. It'll take all your playlists, all your history, all this stuff. Because, once you have your whole listening history, you're never going to change. But by understanding
Yes.
that, You bet, yeah, you should go see some banks and say, "Hey, I can help you get a lot of new customers." You just offer a service
I
that
love it.
is, we facilitate the transition. We go through all your payments, we go through your history, we check all the things, we double, to be sure that, you're set up to go with the new thing. I'm sure that would be, yes.
So, do you think that testimonials are part of projection, or could they be part of projection? I would imagine they could be, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big part around trust in all these transactions. And so, and testimonials, of course, we all know that, if your friend tells you good things about a company, you'll trust them more than the ads. I'm not 100% sure that people actually read the testimonials. It's sort of like, if they're there, there must mean that there's someone out there, someone out there that did something, said something nice, or you're really confirming. You say, okay, I'm almost, let me check and what they say, kind of thing. But that, yeah, I mean, you're really pretty. The fact they exist is one more little trust bump, and then it can serve as, you know. It, it's funny how somehow there was this coffee company and they was wondering what's the best way to sell coffee online. And so they did three websites, one really trendy, fun, Gen Z, one, pretty traditional e-commerce, and one was the encyclopedia of coffee. It was 10,000 pages where they had the first name of every coffee bean and where the farmers were and all this kind of stuff. And surprisingly, this drab encyclopedia site sold more coffee, but no one ever read any of it. But the
Mhm.
fact that it sort of said, we're the experts, and they said, wow, they have all this content. They must really be the expert. I don't have to check. I'm not interested in the farmer in Peru or whatever, but just by, and these testimonials are a little bit like that. And especially, if you get people's picture and their maybe their
Mhm.
job title, or, you can have things stand out. I mean, yeah, there are several ways of trust, and testimonials is one that's important. Sometimes you also
Yeah.
have logos of recognizable companies. We work
Mhm.
with, oh, yeah, they work with Coca-Cola. That must be, they must be really good, whatever.
Right. So that's interesting. If you're just starting out or you are very small business, you may not have those big names on your site. You may not have had an article in a big newspaper somewhere, but just having some testimonials on that gives you some credibility and trust, is
I
what you're
found
saying.
once is, asking for testimonials isn't necessarily easy in a small business and things.
Done. Yeah.
But so you have to sort of do that. And one way I found is to frame the question by saying, if you were going to talk about us to a friend, what would you say? If you were going to, kind of
Mm.
promote our business to a friend, what would you say? Because then they say, hey, they were really, if you say, can you write a testimonial? A lot of people don't know where to start.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do I say? It was good, and then they don't do it. But if there's this kind of template to say, well, or, you know, what was different, once you use, depending on your service,
Hmm.
how did that help or something? By asking these more specific questions, you'll get more answers, and answers in a format that you can, put on your website, because they read as a as something that, someone would say.
A full sentence. Yeah. I have a form which I send clients to, but oftentimes, I get 3 or 4 words. So it's really hard to put that into something that looks like a testimonial. You
Right.
get part of the sentence, but okay. So, all right, let's kind of pull this together. When somebody doesn't buy, is it usually because they maybe didn't recognize themselves or didn't trust what they saw, or maybe they couldn't picture the outcome? So how do you know where along that uh, trail, basically, that you fell short?
So there are some technical ways of seeing, what people actually, how far they go down on your page and how long they stayed. If people come in and then immediately leave, there's also some sort of metrics. If you do kind of an ad that goes to a specific landing page that follows this, and you get a certain, 0.5% of people actually, there are technical ways of finding that something is wrong.
Hmm.
One trick that I found that was really interesting is to ask your actual customers to say, what was the thing where you almost didn't buy? because you can never talk to the people who just didn't buy, but you
Right.
can talk to the people who just did buy. And what was that thing that made them hesitate? If you have enough customers, sort of say, "Oh, I doubted that, but then I went anyways," kind of thing. Well, you think, "Oh, well, other people doubted that and gave up." So by actually interviewing your customers, you can figure. But in that way of saying, if you had hesitated, what would be the thing that would have made you give up? Um,
Mm,
but this is a big. If you change your you change your website and you try to make this all different, and then you hope that you'll see different metrics. It's but then it's a whole other sort of I help build that story. And then depending on your channel, is it a pitch deck? Is it a website? Is it what, how to then optimize that? I mean, there's all these techniques if you go to, an agency to then do A/B testing and all, and then, or have even, there's some companies that specialize in sort of customer tests and things like that. But that goes, beyond my expertise.
mm,
Um,
mm.
but somehow you feel that already these shifts make a big enough difference that then you can optimize later.
Well, if you're a small business and you're busy, where should you focus on adding that storytelling first? Is it your website or your homepage, your sales page, email, social media? Where would be, do you think personally, that is the most powerful place to start?
I sort of feel that still today, that your website is sort of this central thing. I mean, we haven't really defined who we're talking to, but I mean, if
Yeah.
you're the corner shop selling milk, well, I mean, I'm not sure you have to concentrate on your website. But say you're offering, a service or a product, and somehow people they could have seen an ad, seen a thing, even seen the object, or someone have talked about it. They're gonna go to your website to say, okay, what is this? Who are these people? Do I trust them? And that'll be a kind of reference point. And it's also a way, kind of a long form way. A lot of people are obsessed with making the homepage really short because people will, they're not going to read too much. But if you follow those steps, people, you catch that next question as it comes, and they'll actually go through. So yes, I would start with that, because then that's the core story. So then, if you wanted to do a post, you can do a short version. It's
Mm-hmm.
easier to start with this long version and then take bits and pieces. You're in a cocktail party and I say, what do you do? Instead of saying, you know, I do storytelling. It's sort of like, companies struggle with how they talk, and this is how I make their life better. And there's these sort of short versions that come from that core version that you build.
Hmm. Do you feel like one of those gets neglected more often, like recognition, perception, projection? Is one of those most often skipped?
Well, first of all, if you're gonna, I think the recognition one is not only powerful, but it sort of opens the door to the next step. People
Mm,
will be a little bit more engaged when they're reading, how you explain what you do. And so, sure, we can help them down the line with this projection part, but if they never arrive, they'll never get there.
so
So
start
start at the
there.
beginning. Start at the
Okay.
beginning, and I find that recognition is a little bit more tricky. What's the best way to describe your ideal customer, their aspiration, their challenge, where they really feel, "Ooh, this is for me." That's quite an exercise. To
Mhm.
at the end of at the bottom of the page, to say, 1, 2, 3, this is how it's going to work. This is our process. These are the problems we solve. These are your, positive future benefits. Those are things that people know about. They just forget to talk about them. So it's less, you have to remember to put them in a certain order and in a certain way, so you feel that people, they will actually stop and read them. But finding that way, daring to say, these are the people we serve. These are the people we work with. People, well, then I'm going to miss out on some. And so that recognition exercise, not only brings the change of perception of the website, but changes the mindset of the people in the company about, the focus and the positioning. So I think that's really powerful.
Right. It's scary as a small business owner to do that, 100%, but it's a big pie.
Yeah, exactly.
John, where can people find out more about you?
So my company name is Standpoint because it's so important to take the other person's standpoint. I think I've used the word standpoint 12
Mhm.
times in this thing. But it's standpoint.ch. I'm in Switzerland,
Mhm.
and the .ch is the extension for Switzerland. And on the website, you'll find a little bit of information about the method. I wrote a best-selling book, so you can actually get the whole method. There are canvases that you use with Post-its and AI prompts that you can use to help you do all this, this thing. You can just there's a calendar at the bottom of the page where you can book a half an hour with me. We'll talk about your brand and see, what insights we can give. I also have a tagline generator. So you can go in and you describe your company and ask things about your company and sort of you get this idea of what kind of questions and what kind of things you have to think about, and then goes through this whole process with different formats and things until you come up with a real powerful tagline, and that can be fun.
Great. And we'll put all of those in the show notes, of course. So thank you so much, John. This has been awesome. I love talking about storytelling.
Well, thank you,
Appreciate it.
Janice. This has been fun, and I can't wait for this to come out and to show everyone.
So here's a challenge for you this week. Take a look at your website, in your social media, or a sales page, and then ask yourself, where am I helping people recognize themselves? Where am I building trust? And where am I helping them visualize the outcome? I can tell you that I'll be doing the same thing. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you could share it with another business owner who could use a little more clarity in their marketing too. And if you're not already subscribed to My Weekly Marketing, please make sure you hit the follow button so you don't miss another episode. For more information about anything we talked about today, visit myweeklymarketing.com/166. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.